That day, my friend Oliver dragged me to a restaurant to meet a rich businessman who had money to invest in our startup. The businessman agreed to give us 5 minutes of his time. We looked like rich people. Chic suits, high status watches. We ordered the most expensive dishes on the menu. But it was all fake. The watches were replicas and the suits were for rent. Oliver pawned his grandmother's ring so that we could have dinner here. They'll find us out for sure. The businessman still didn't show up, and I was about to leave when a girl came up to our table. How pretty she was. It turned out that we had been booked at the same table by mistake. Oliver immediately invited the girl to join us. She said yes. I haven't had a nice relationship with a girl in a long time, therefore, what if this was my chance? Her name was Harriet. She was supposed to have dinner with a friend, but she just canceled their meeting. We got talking, and in order to not lose my face, I said that I come to this restaurant, constantly. Like I went to a good college and that we have our own business, which brings in a lot of money. You should have seen Oliver's face. I was so used to playing a rich guy that I didn't recognize myself. By the end of the evening, I was so emboldened that I asked Harriet to meet again, and she agreed. And the rich guy didn't show up for the meeting, so it seemed like he wasn't gonna waste his time on us at all. On the way home, Oliver kept talking about the business, and that we could do it without being rich. Our project would start making money soon, but, of course, I didn't listen to him. I only thought about her. Oliver understood everything from my stupid smile, and he immediately decided to break off my whole buzz. A gorgeous girl has gorgeous requests, he confidently stated, and unfortunately, he was right, because I lied to her about everything. I have no bank account, no education, and the only thing I have is our startup. The day was set for the next day, but I wasn't gonna back it up no matter what. When I got home, my mother was already asleep. I moved in with her when her health got worse. The doctors said that they needed a kidney transplant. After my dad died, I had to take care of my mother, and I wanted to make her happy. We sold almost everything, but in the end, we collected the necessary amount, and now all that was left was to wait in line for the surgery. Soon, Harriet texted me. She thanked me for dinner and said that she loved the lobsters. Man, I set the bar too high. I started searching through the cabinets for anything else that could be quickly sold to raise at least some money, and I came across a box with my mother's stash for surgery. No, stop! The idea of taking money from there was very bad. And I hope Harriet doesn't just like me because I'm allegedly a rich dude. The next day, I took Harriet to the park and gave her a bunch of daisies. She asked, "Is this a joke?" Harriet was ready to leave, and I was scared. I lied that this was a hoax, and the real date would be at my favorite restaurant. We took a taxi, and I made up an excuse to stop near my house. I said I was helping the poor, and I needed to check on one of them. Harriet said it was very nice, but she'd rather wait in the car. Phew, close call. I flew into the apartment and reached into the closet for the stash. "I'll pay you back. Honestly, I hope Mom doesn't notice anything." At the restaurant, Harriet cheered up, and I was very happy about it. And days went by, and Harriet was really happy, because I always gave her expensive gifts. A week later, she started inviting me to hang out with her richy friends. The rich world just blinded me. But I kept thinking that the money was running out. One day, Oliver called me and told me that we were finally rich. Of course, he was joking, but yeah. The startup brought in the first money, which means that I will return everything I took from my mother's stash. But my entire share of the profit had been spent on an expensive bracelet for Harriet, which she begged for the same day. She was thrilled, and at the end of the evening, she invited me to a family dinner. She said that she had serious feelings for me, which meant it was time to meet her parents. Wow, I was beginning to think that she was only with me for the money. But getting to know your parents is an important step. Such trust. X day has arrived. We went to Harriet's parents' house, but I couldn't find a place for myself. I thought they'd figured me out in a heartbeat. In the end, it turned out to be much worse than I imagined. First, her family lived in a mansion, where I felt uncomfortable. And secondly, her dad immediately flooded me with questions. Where I study, who I work for, and what I do in life. I had to repeat the usual lie. I study at a prestigious college and work on a successful project. Harriet's mother immediately liked me, but her father looked at me suspiciously. After dinner, Harriet showed me to the house. Her father had a fancy office. We talked in the luxurious chairs, and for the first time that evening, I relaxed a little. Suddenly, Harriet got up and went to the safe. She asked me to be quiet. She was going to borrow some money from her dad. As I understand it, her father didn't spoil Harriet with money, so she stole it from his safe, a little at a time. What a familiar situation. I watched as she fearfully dialed the numbers on her father's safe. It was strange that such a large amount of money was kept under the PIN code 1111. When we said goodbye to Harriet's parents, her father took me aside and asked if I had prepared a gift for Harriet. Her birthday was coming up. I immediately lied that I had a necklace with large rubies. As luck would have it, Harriet heard this and started thanking me. What have I done? Where will I get the money from? I was as dark as a cloud when I got home, and then my mother decided to finish me off completely. She will get surgery in 2 days. The doctor called and said that there was a free place. They just needed her consent. Mother was so happy. She started to hug me, but I snapped at her. This stupid surgery was completely out of time. My mother asked what was wrong with me, but I just mumbled that everything was fine and ran into the room. I couldn't sleep at night. How could I get the money in 2 days? There was no point in asking Oliver, since he was handing over bottles to buy noodles to feed himself. The next morning, I went to several banks, but none of them wanted to give a loan to a ragamuffin with a weird startup. I was so desperate that I even considered robbing a bank. Stop. Harriet's rich dad wouldn't even notice if a few pathetic $1,000s go missing from his safe. The safe is full of money, and I remember the code. Why didn't I think of this before? I started preparing for the robbery. I made a mask out of the hat and figured out how to get around the cameras and security. That night, I went to Harriet's house. Luck was on my side. I waited until a couple of thugs had moved away from the wall and jumped over it. But there was a real giant with my club. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. As soon as he was gone, I ran to the front of the door. The office was on the second floor, where I crept on tiptoe. My hands were shaking with excitement as I typed in the code on the safe. That's it, Steve. There's no turning back. Now, you're not only a liar, but also a thief. When the safe was opened, I quickly stuffed the money into my pockets and went on the stairs. I was about to go down to the first floor, but Harriet's father was standing right next to me. Damn it! I tried to slip past him, but he heard footsteps and noticed me. The old man tried to grab hold of me and pulled off the mask. I fearfully rushed away and hit him with my shoulder, not on purpose. In the next second, he was falling head over heels. Suddenly, I heard a crunch. I wanted to see if he was all right, but there was no time. I might be caught, and I ran away. On the way home, I told myself that he had hurt himself and nothing terrible had happened to him, but I definitely got caught. He saw my face and he must have recognized me. Harriet called me the next morning. She cried for a long time and said that her father was attacked at night. My heart skipped a beat, and my hands shook with excitement. Suddenly, he had something to say. I nervously asked if the cameras caught the attacker, but I was lucky, because Harriet said you couldn't see his face, and that her father was in a coma, but the doctors didn't tell them to hope for the best. God, how lucky I am. If only she knew that her father was in a coma because of me. I was so scared that I even thought of turning myself into the police. But I knew it would only make things worse for everyone. I had to wait for Harriet's dad to wake up. Wait, what if he doesn't remember anything, and everything will just be as before? My mother's surgery went successfully, and she didn't notice the loss of money. We wanted this for so long, and I couldn't even be happy for my own mother. Oliver and I were already making good money in our business, and within a few days, I had quietly returned the stolen money to Harriet's father's safe. I was on pins and needles for a few weeks. I wanted Harriet to leave me alone, but in such a difficult situation, she needed support and gifts. Again. And then Harriet's father woke up. I did not want to go in to see him at all, but Harriet said he wasn't thinking straight, and he wasn't talking right now. She asked me to come, and I agreed. Her father looked bad. He could barely breathe, but he still found the strength to sit up and point a finger at me, whispering, "You." Fortunately, he didn't have time to finish. His eyes rolled back, and his mouth foamed. The doctors tried to resuscitate him. As we sat in the waiting room, Harriet anxiously waited for her father to get better, and I knew I was finished. I needed a distraction, so I suggested a snack. I brought us sandwiches and instant coffee from the vending machine. Last supper on the loose. Harriet was acting up again, and haughtily said that she didn't eat gluten. Who would doubt it? Suddenly, the doctor came out of the room and mournfully looked at Harriet. They couldn't do anything. Harriet slid to the floor and sobbed. At this moment, her mother rushed into the hospital. She ran up to her daughter and began to calm her down. 2 states were fighting in me. I hated myself for what I had done. Even if it was an accident, I killed a man. Although, on the other hand, it was difficult to contain my joy, because no one would know my terrible secret. I took one last look at poor Harriet and left the hospital, and that was the end. We never met again. I went too far for her.
How pathetic I am. I was sitting in one of the lockers in a girl's locker room recording Stacy, the school's reigning beauty, on my phone. I have 0 chances. but I still dreamed of dating her. It was a pity that Stacy had changed too quickly and was about to leave with the other cheerleaders. But now I can finally move. My back hurts terribly. Everyone's gone. I pushed the locker door open, but it wouldn't budge. I kicked at the door for 20 minutes with all my might until I was completely exhausted, and then I was overcome by panic. The door was firmly jammed. Heck, I think I'm stuck in the women's locker room. A panic attack hit me. It's Friday, everyone's gone. No one will be here for the next 2 days. I'm going to die of hunger and thirst. Then I took my phone out of my pocket and tried to call a friend, but there was no connection in this iron box. I began frantically feeling the shelves of the locker. Bingo! I found a nail file and forged the lock with it. It started to open, but the nail file suddenly slipped out through the crack and clattered to the floor of the locker room. At that very moment, someone came into the locker room. It was Olivia, the headmaster's daughter, the creepy girl who's been sending me Valentines since first grade. But damn it, I was glad to see her today. She's my chance to get out of here, and she's not going to turn me in. I wanted to call her, but Olivia looked around and went to pretty Stacy's locker. She definitely broke the lock with a hairpin. The headmaster's daughter turned out to be a thief. Wow, I tried to see what she's doing. But at the moment I hit the wall of the locker, Olivia started to shout in surprise and ask who was there. I immediately asked her to release me. A little taken back, Olivia went to the locker and started opening it. This time, she couldn't open the lock so easily. Finally, the lock clicked and the locker opened. It seems that when she saw me, Olivia even blushed. She didn't expect it to be me. But just as I was trying to get out, I noticed that she was recording me on the phone. What's that for? Everyone in the school will see this video if you refuse to help me, she replied. Olivia, what the heck do you want from me? Olivia said we couldn't go to the main exit right now because the cameras would catch us, and that's the true evidence. Stop. So what she's up to is also illegal? Olivia went on. We have to go down the drain pipe so that no one will notice. I nervously laughed. Olivia, are you out of your mind? I said it was too much. I wouldn't do it. But Olivia showed me a video of me sitting in a locker with a stupid face with my arm around a dusty bra. She didn't seem to be joking at all. I looked out of the window and glanced at the pipe. It was old and rusty. It did not inspire confidence at all. You go first quickly, Olivia said. I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't notice how I was outside with my arms wrapped around the pipe. There were 5 floors underfoot. One move and we're off. What did I get myself into? When my feet hit the ground, I couldn't believe we did it. A few seconds later, Olivia came down. So now I've fulfilled your plan, I blurted out. Almost, said Olivia. There's only one little thing left. You should go to Stacy's house and talk to her for about 10 minutes. But Stacy is the girl I dream of. I was taken aback. What is this nonsense? She won't even listen to me. Olivia, what are you up to? She stood so close and looked at me like that I even thought she again wanted to tell me she loved me. Gosh, Olivia, this isn't the right time. But she pulled away and just reminded me to hurry. If we're late, you already know what the consequences will be, she added. We walked to Stacy's house in silence. I still didn't know what to say to the girl I wanted to talk to every day. Maybe I should just pretend to ring the doorbell and lie that no one was home. But Olivia seemed to read my mind and she said she'd be watching me from around the corner. When we reached the house, I timidly went up the steps and rang the bell. Olivia went around the corner of the house and hid there. Stacy opened up the door and asked me what I was doing there. I hesitated, but then noticed that Olivia was trying to climb through a window on the first floor. Stacy snapped that if I'd just come to stand there, I could do it from across the street. What a shame. So I started talking nonsense about doing a biology project with Stacy, planting seeds of rare species, and then monitoring their growth. Stacy looked at me like I was an idiot and said that I was a rare species myself and that I needed to be examined by the doctors. While I was still talking that nonsense, I noticed Olivia was scrambling back. Whew, thank God Stacy didn't turn around. I'll come back some other time, I said quickly. I turned around and went around the corner of the house where Olivia was waiting for me. I wanted to yell, but I couldn't make any noise. And I just said I hated her for making me look like an idiot in front of my crush. Olivia looked at me and said, "Do you hate me?" Then she sighed and said that we often hate the wrong people. What's she talking about? Then Olivia told me that it wasn't her I should hate, but Stacy. She had done a terrible thing. Stacy had long been a rival to Olivia's friend Teresa. 2 months ago, right on the eve of the city's cheerleading competition, Stacy pushed Teresa at rehearsals. After that, Teresa couldn't even get up. The doctor said it was a spinal fracture. There was even a required surgery, but Teresa didn't have the money. It all looked like an accident, so Stacy refused to help. But Olivia knew how it really was. She went to the police, but they said there was not enough evidence and just her words were not enough. So Olivia decided to do justice herself, sneak into Stacy's house and steal her money. And at the same time, she'd teach her a lesson. I was taken aback. Olivia's eyes were wild. She was crazy. It really could have been an accident. Maybe it wasn't Stacy's fault at all. I said we had to get the money back. But Olivia screamed that Stacy had deliberately pushed Teresa and had to pay for it. At that moment, I knew Olivia was dangerous. I had to do something about it. I said a hasty goodbye, walked away, and called the police. I was sure I was doing the right thing. The cops came quickly. Olivia hadn't gone far yet, and she was detained. I went with them as a witness. We spent 3 hours at the station. Just as I was starting to fall asleep in my chair, Stacy bursted into the room. She threw her arms around me and enthusiastically told me that I was now her hero. I couldn't believe my luck. I held Stacy tight, but she pulled away. Looked at Olivia and said that now she was definitely finished. When Olivia was taken away for questioning, Stacy and I were left alone, and then I asked if it was true that she pushed her opponent on the competition eve. Stacy said that the rabble should know their place, and that she knows how to take revenge without being noticed. I was taken aback. That is, it was you who pushed Teresa? Stacy just grinned. What a rascal she was. How could I have a crush on her? At that moment, Olivia was led past us in handcuffs. I rushed to the policemen and demanded them to release Olivia. This is all a mistake, a huge mistake. But no one listened to me, and now I'm sitting in court. In a few minutes, the jury will sentence Olivia. During the investigation, Olivia didn't give me away. It turned out that she, unlike me, knows how to keep her word. When I was called as a witness at the trial, I stated that I had not seen Olivia that night. I knew I had to try to change everything. In the hall, I noticed the school's headmaster, Olivia's dad. He was crying. I've never seen him like this before. It was unbearably painful to watch. The jury went out to confer. Every second seemed like an eternity to me. Finally, they announced their decision. Olivia was given 2 months of community service for breaking into Stacy's house. I was also sent to sort garbage for making false statements. And so, on the eve of Valentine's Day, we are forced to collect empty bottles on the track. Not the most romantic thing, but what else can we do? During the time we spent together, I realized how cool Olivia was. I took a Valentine card out of my pocket and handed it to Olivia. She smiled and asked, "So, do you actually care about me?" It was actually a friendly gesture. But for a second, I wondered if I really did. Olivia has become something more to me during this time. I secretly opened a tattoo parlor in our garage and kept it from my dad Cobb. That day, I was slipping through a crime newsfeed waiting for another client. Wow, there's a maniac in the city. What an ugly face. At this point, the door creaked. I turned around and froze. Beard, earrings, everything was exactly as on the photo robot from the news. Wow, cool! My detective mind immediately went into the game. The man did not introduce himself but only extended to me his hand. There in the column were tattoos and crossed out women's names. Damn, why are they all crossed out? I had to cross out the last one. Lucy. My favorite name. It was my neighbor's name. The most beautiful girl in the world. I was in love with her for years. Yep, I was only 13 and she was 19. So what? Because of my fascination with detectives, I had almost no friends and everyone laughed at me. But cops actually did not cope. Here, there was a maniac in the city. I would catch him, and Lucy would want to date me right away. My hands shook a little under the stark gaze that the bearded. He asked me to finish as soon as possible. I was even more terrified from this calm intonation. He behaved like nothing happened. Final touch, and it's ready. I wanted to expose this freak and ask if the entire county police were looking for him. But someone went into the garage. I turned around. It was Lucy. But she didn't even look at me and headed to this man and called him Max. So, okay, now I knew his name. She hugged him, saying she missed him. And then she naughtily added, "You like hanging out with kids more than with me?" What? She's talking about me, isn't she? And then it came to me. She dated this Max guy. But why then did he just cross out her name? I was stunned. Lucy led him by the hand to the exit. Max said he needed to go into the store and that a surprise would await her in the evening. They left, and I was paralyzed by the thought that Max wanted to deal with Lucy. Looked like she was the next victim of a mad maniac. I discreetly followed Max. He headed to the sports store. Weird. I was walking between the rows trying to find him, and then I saw Max picking a baseball bat. Now I've got you. I took out the phone to get a photo proof, but the click of my camera was heard by the entire store. Max turned around too and moved quickly to the counter, which I hid behind. My heart was popping out of my chest. What happens if this Hulk finds out about me? But then Max was distracted by the seller. I rushed away and ran to Lucy's house. I'll save her and she'll know what I really am. And those people who laughed at me and my dad and the whole city too. But on the doorstep I slowed down. I thought I feared talking to her even more than I feared a mad maniac. Come on, you can do it, I said to myself and knocked. Lucy opened the door and immediately asked, "What do you need?" I blushed and babbled that her boyfriend was a maniac. Lucy laughed, stroked me on the cheek and said I was cute, but shouldn't meddle in people's lives. Lucy, you will change your mind when you see what your boyfriend was buying at the store. I got the phone out, but Lucy asked not to spoil the surprise and immediately slammed the door. I went home and saw the police car in the yard. My dad came back from duty. Unfortunately, I didn't have him as cool a cop as Sherlock Holmes, and I questioned whether I should tell him about Max, even more so than Dad would know about my underground tattoo parlor. But Lucy's life was at stake. I went up to my dad and told him everything. Surprisingly, he was cool about it, but said I needed to watch detective movies less. He also added that it was illegal to open a tattoo parlor at my age and that I should wrap things up with it. I knew so. He always forbid me everything. But after a little pause, he mysteriously added that he had already seen my album with tattoos and that I was talented with it, but only in drawing. An investigation should be handled by professionals. Afterwards, he promised that he would run this Max through the system tomorrow and flopped onto the couch watching TV. Suddenly, there was a roar of a motorcycle outside the window. I looked out and saw that it was Max's bike. He stopped by for Lucy, now took her somewhere. I need to catch up with him. I ran so hard that I was blacking out, constantly losing sight of them, but still I got it. The bike was parked outside an abandoned cafe, and sounds of bumps and screams were heard from the backyard. I grabbed a stick, walked around the cafe, and looked cautious from behind the corner. What's going on here? Max for some reason had his eyes blindfolded and he had already swung his bat. Oh no! And then I noticed a piñata, a ball toy stuffed with candy. Hold on a second. What does this all mean? At this point my dad called me. Max turned around on the sound of the ringing and oh damn, at 3 jumps he was nearby and grabbed me by the hood. I dangled stupidly over the ground until I fell. Max said he was going to take me home now. Max asked Lucy to wait for him at the lodge house. He forcefully put me on the bike and whispered ominously that I had prevented him from saying goodbye to Lucy forever. What? He does not even hide that he wants to finish her off. I need more evidence. And then I noticed Max's cell phone sticking out of his pocket. I gently tried to get it, but Max yelled for me to hold on tightly. We sharply slowed down at the intersection. I rolled off the bike, allegedly clinging to Max's jacket. A bruised elbow, but I still got his phone. We drove up to the house. Seeing my dad, I immediately ran to him. Dad, arrest him! He admitted that he would want to finish Lucy. But instead, my dad just locked me in the room and said I was under house arrest. I wasn't going to give up so easy. And most importantly, I already had a solid evidence, Mike's cell phone. And indeed, it was full of chats with girls. There was no time to think, so I opened the window and carefully climbed out. I needed to save Lucy. In his text messages, there were coordinates to the guest house by the lake, which Max spoke about. But it was a 2-hour drive. How do I get there? There were no taxis at night. And then my dad's car caught my eyes. I could find myself in prison for this, but I was ready to take a chance. Lucy's life mattered more. I got in the car and wanted to start it, but accidentally turned on the siren. Damn, not that button! My dad stormed out right away and ran to me screaming. I quickly started the car and hit the gas. I'll save Lucy. I'll reveal Max, and you'll understand everything, Dad. 2 hours later, I was already near the lake and left the car away so I could not be noticed. I saw in the movies that they did so, but my legs refused to go. I exhaled. If I end up dead today, then at least I will be remembered as a hero. I rushed to the house, but someone grabbed me from behind, clutching my mouth. It was Max. Terrified, I tried to break out, but he only squeezed me harder. He started whispering some nonsense into my ears. Turns out Lucy was after him, and now we were both in danger. I didn't believe a word. As soon as Max's grip loosened, I yelled with all my might, "Lucy, save yourself!" And then she appeared. Sloped hair, mad look, bat in hand. Go to the house, she told Max. And he, turning pale, went to the door. I was so glad she was alive, but Lucy hissed to me. Where did you come from, little brat? She grabbed my hand and dragged me inside the house. I didn't understand anything. Locking up Max, she dragged me into the next room. It was not possible to break out. Lucy held my hands tightly. Tying me to a chair, she, as insane, repeated that she was sure of Max's love and he decided to dump her. She wasted so much time, got rid of all his girlfriends, and she was about to dump her? That's it. Now he would pay for her suffering. So was Lucy a maniac? That thought made me shiver. Lucy left. And from the next room there were shouts and rumble. I had to do something. Tightly tied up, I could only make the chair rickety in the hope that it would fall and break. I knew this sometimes worked in detectives. I pushed myself with my feet and fell on my back. The chair turned out to be strong. Tied to a chair, I still tried to approach the door. I hardly opened it with my foot and crawled into the room where Max was. I started hitting the door with my foot, and in the end, the tree cracked. Through the slit, I saw Lucy's enraged face. Max, run! I tried to scream, but Max didn't hear me. He was passed out. Lucy, what did you do with him? Lucy dramatically opened the door. You already know too much, jerk. I squeezed my eyes shut in terror. Suddenly, there were sirens. Finally, police! Lucy tried to escape, but was quickly apprehended by police officers. My dad also walked among them. It was strange, but Dad looked so cool. Lucy was immediately detained, and Dad untied me and said I had just saved Max's life. I was so grateful to my dad for help. But how did he find me? It turned out that all police cars were equipped with beacons, so it wasn't difficult. On the way home, Dad said I had a flair for criminals, just like he had in his youth. I didn't understand anything. But what about the photo robot from the news? It was Max. Dad bursted out laughing and said all the beardies were similar. I had to be careful when I blamed someone. A couple weeks later, Dad caught the real maniac, and Lucy turned out to have done nothing of that to Max's girls. She only intimidated them by forcing them to break up with him. So soon I closed the tattoo parlor and immersed in the cases. I decided to only draw during my spare time, and for now, I am actively preparing for admission to the police academy. And one day Max came to my house. We hugged like old friends. After all, we'd been through so much together. And then he said he came for a new tattoo, and even though I didn't do it anymore, Max convinced me, saying that it was very important to him. I asked which name we would tattoo this time. Max replied briefly, yours. I was the only reason he still believed in people, would never forget how I saved him, and girls dumped him all the time. He doesn't know anything. I told him Lucy was to blame for breaking up with the girls. Max was stunned. He said he had already practically lost faith in himself, but now he understood why all the girls dumped him. Thank you, mates, Max uttered. Then I admitted to him that I was wrong too, when I mistook him for a maniac, and when I thought it was possible to catch criminals, as in movies. And now I decided to change my life. I enrolled in a police academy and attended class after school. After that, Max severely shook my hand. He told me that he believed that one day I would definitely be a real cop.
In the evening, I arrived at the address the detective had given me. As soon as I went inside, I saw homeless people in dirty clothes on the floor. Was this a flop house? One of them grabbed my arm. I looked closer and recognized him. That was my husband, Jim. The fact is that a year ago, he went on a business trip and disappeared. To be honest, I wasn't even upset because we hadn't talked much lately. He was always in his laptop and I had zero attention. Jim was the genius of IT, created some program, sold it to a large corporation, and became a millionaire, but he hid all the money. And he always said that all the most valuable things should be kept in a safe. I tried to get his code, but Jim was adamant. When Jim disappeared, I honestly wasn't even upset. I decided to find someone who would appreciate me. I started going to clubs and met a nice actor named Robert. He liked to hang out, not like my hubby Jim. However, the money quickly ran out from such a life. Then Robert suggested hiring a private investigator and finding Jim. That was the only way to know the code to his safe. And today, finally, a detective found my husband Jim. Only he didn't say he was a bum now. I needed to find out the code for the safe from him. But I didn't want to do it in front of everyone, so I barely tore my husband away from the other homeless people. Took him outside and pushed him into the car. Jim protested and said something, but I didn't care. On the way, I didn't let Jim get a word in, just told him how much I suffered without him. I also added that I had spent all the money on the detective, and now we needed the code to the safe to pay for all the expenses. But Jim suddenly interrupted me and asked who I was and what kind of safe I was talking about. I stopped the car abruptly. How is that? I'm your wife. Are you having blackouts? Jim said nothing. At home, I immediately took him to the safe. Well, what are you looking at? Dial the code, just 4 digits. Jim pressed something, but the code was wrong. I don't remember anything. Nothing at all, Jim said softly and sadly. So he really had blackouts? What a surprise! I had no money for a doctor, so I decided to try it myself. Showed him a photo of us together, which was on the table. It's me, see? I'm your wife. Come on, remember. Suddenly, he smiled enigmatically and said that he remembered the photo. Looked like we went on a catamaran that day, together. Well, we did that, and what? And then Jim looked at me carefully. I came up with a code for the safe from the numbers that mean important events in my life. And it seems that it was during the walk that I came up with the first number. Hooray! Then tomorrow morning, we'll go to the park. I will help you remember everything, dear. Just don't forget to wash up. I sent him to bed. What a klutz he was. Soon, Robert and I would take all his money, and we would be happy. In the morning, Jim was waiting for me at the car. He was clean-shaven, and stylishly dressed. It would be better, of course, to remember the code and be done with it. In the park, Jim took me around some edges and bridges. Yes, Jim, it's so beautiful, but maybe you can remember the first digit of the password. But Jim suddenly took it into his head to write the decrepit catamarans. Gritting my teeth, I climbed into this boat. It was worth to have a tough time for the money. I had to dodge the spray flying from the wheels of the catamaran. Jim noticed how annoyed I was and deliberately swam even faster. Hey, what are you doing? You ruined my hair. I shouted for Jim to turn back to the beach immediately, but he was staring at some swans. I was running out of patience, and I was about to get up to speak when the boat lurched, and I fell into the water. Help me! I can't swim! I went deeper and deeper under the water, and the last thing I heard was a dull splash. When I woke up, I saw Jim standing in front of me, looking flustered. He was all wet and said he could barely get me out of the water. I immediately pushed him away. It's all your fault. The first digit is 2. Like a swan's neck, Jim said happily. What? And the other numbers? But Jim just shrugged. Okay, at least that way, but now I needed a warm bath. At home, I locked myself in the bathroom and called Robert. I missed him so much. But he interrupted me and asked about the safe. When he heard that I hadn't got the code yet, he told me to hurry up. There was music in the background. I suddenly felt sad that he was hanging out without me, but I pushed those thoughts away, just a little more. When I came out of the bathroom, Jim noticed that I was sad and tried to hug me, but I pulled away. Better remember the code. We'll soon have something to eat. How could I help him remember the code? Got an idea. I took out our album and began to play the role of the worried wife. I showed him one picture after another. But Jim didn't react. How could he forget all this? And then he pointed to our picture from the Grand Canyon. It seemed that on this trip, he came up with a second figure. I decided not to delay and rented a Jeep and a Mexican guide. I hoped I was not wasting our last money, and he would remember the damn code. 3 hours later, we were driving through the canyon, the guide talking cheerfully and Jim gazing thoughtfully at the scenery. When we stopped at the edge of the abyss, the Mexican suggested that we go out and take a photo. Jim was happy, but I was uneasy. The guy was looking at my bag in a strange way. As soon as Jim and I got out, I felt someone pushing me toward the cliff. Give me the bag or I'll push you over. The Mexican was coming at us. I looked into the abyss. One more step and we would fall. But suddenly Jim whispered, "Don't be afraid," and abruptly knocked the guy to the ground. Jim, what are you doing? While he was trying to restrain the Mexican, I began to call for help. But when I turned around, all I saw was the guide running away. Jim ran up to me and asked if I was hurt, even though he had a split eyebrow. And then I remembered that when I married Jim, he didn't have much money yet. But I knew I was always safe with him. Jim took my hand and said, "Look at the sunset." I looked up the sky and was speechless. Because of this stupid Mexican guy, we almost missed this beauty. We sat on the edge of the cliff until the sun went down. I waited a long time, but Jim didn't remember anything. When it was almost dark, I pulled Jim's arm and told him it was time to go. Come on, Jim. The world is still full of wonders. Suddenly, Jim abruptly got up from the ground and told me that I had helped him. He always called the Grand Canyon the 8th wonder of the world. The next number was 8. I threw my arms around Jim. We would open the damn safe soon. At home, I spent the whole evening flipping through our album. I wanted to know what other places might be important to him. Flipping through the pages with the photos, I was surprised to note it seemed that sometimes I was really happy with him and it was not about the money at all. But now I had Robert. All my memories with Jim were in the past, and I lived in the here and now. In the morning, Jim took me for a walk around the neighborhood. To walk again? I was so sick of it, but he said he had an idea. We'd been wandering the streets all day, and I'd been longing to sit down somewhere. Fortunately, we came to a park with a gazebo. I rushed over and sat down on the first bench I saw. Then Jim asked me mysteriously if I remembered the place. His words gave me the creeps. This was the place where we met. On what date did we meet? Oh, I remember. April 26th. He said he was very touched that I remembered the date. And then I added the 2 and 6 were the remaining digits of the code. His heart told me so. Jim approached me. Does he want to kiss me? We were interrupted by a call from Robert. Damn, not now. I hung up on him. But Jim noticed. Who is this? He asked. I hesitated, but quickly said that it was some kind of advertisement. We walked home in silence. I didn't understand. Why did I hung up on Robert? I wanted to be with Jim. I didn't even notice we were at the house. I immediately remembered the safe. I would get this over with soon. Suddenly, I heard a deafening noise coming from the office where the safe was. I opened the door and saw Robert with a gas burner, who was trying to open the door of the safe. When he saw me, he stopped for a second and said nervously, "You're no good. I'll do it myself." Robert turned on the burner and quickly finished what he had started. The door gave way and opened. Jim had been watching the whole thing blankly. Robert and I were stunned. We looked inside, but there was no money there. Only my wedding photo with Jim. Wait. I turned to Jim and said, "Is that what you called the most valuable thing?" He smiled. My heart ached. Disappointed, Jim said that he had always kept the money in the basement. "You can have it. It's in 2 old suitcases." And then he added quietly, "I remember everything. But it's a pity that for you, money was the most valuable thing in life." Jim left. Robert ran happily down to the basement, and I couldn't move. After a while, Robert picked up the suitcases with the money from the basement and dragged me to the taxi. "Hurry up to the airport before that jerk changes his mind and catches up with us," Robert said. In the taxi, I couldn't stop thinking. This picture and all the numbers in the code were connected to our memories. So, this was really the most valuable thing for him. Jim really cared about me. How did I not notice this for so many years? As soon as we arrived, Robert grabbed the suitcases with the money and jumped out of the taxi. "Come on, get out, we have to go," he shouted angrily. But I was thinking, and I couldn't move. It was too hard to shut out my thoughts. Then Robert calmly said that he would go alone. After all, he finally had all the money, and then it became clear to me why he was trying so hard. In an instant, I slammed the door and shouted to the taxi driver, "We're going back." I realized he really loved me all this time. No one was home. I was restless, but suddenly I remembered Jim saying goodbye to his homeless friends. Could I be there? I ran around the flop house, oblivious to the smell and the dirt. I was just about to leave when I noticed someone in the corner, and I came over quietly. It was Jim. I rushed to him and begged his forgiveness on my knees. What a fool I am, Jim. You loved me more than anything in the world. How could I not see that? I was sobbing, and Jim was holding me close and apologizing for not paying enough attention to me. When he remembered everything, Jim felt ashamed, and he decided to remind himself and me how good we were together, although we sometimes did not notice it. Without breaking our embrace, we left the flop house and went to the park, to our gazebo. And then Jim said, "If you want, we can go to the club right now." But I already had a better idea. "Let's have a hot dog, and we'll walk in the park until morning." Did you like the video? Then subscribe and like it. support the channel. Thank you!